Well. I think we know where Cooper Flagg might be going in this June's draft, the NBA Draft Lottery. The order being revealed just moments ago, and it is the Dallas Mavericks with the #1 overall pick in this year's draft, which all signs point to them landing the consensus #1 overall pick, Cooper Flagg out of Duke. Meanwhile, the Spurs with the second pick, Sixers getting the 3rd overall pick, Hornets rounding out the top 4, followed by the Utah Jazz. We are now joined by CBS Sports NBA analyst Tim Doyle and former coach and player Avery Johnson. And fellas, I think we know where Cooper Flagg is landing now. And just thinking about everything that happened to this Dallas Mavericks team this season, how much the fans were in an uproar, I think the entire NBA maybe with some question marks. Coach, how big is this for the Mavs franchise? And I'm going to also throw in Nico Harrison as well.
Well, I guess all the Mavericks fans, they need to ask for forgiveness and stop saying fire Nico. Okay, that's over and done with, because this Mavericks team that's going to have the addition of Cooper Flagg, who will be the first pick in the draft. It's going to be a terrific team that can potentially go from worst to first next year. Pairing him with Anthony Davis and P.J. Washington, obviously Kyrie Irving's going to get back probably the middle or towards the end of the season, another Duke guy who went #1 in the draft. How excited. I can feel it. I live here in Dallas. They have earthquakes in Los Angeles. I felt something shaking when the Mavericks ping pong ball came up #1. This city, oh man, it's unbelievable. I'm so excited. I'm happy for the franchise. And wow, this is an amazing accomplishment for a team that had 1.8% chance to get the #1 pick. What a turn of events for the Mavericks compared to what happened 3 or 4 months ago.
Exactly. Coach, I might need to send you outside really briefly. I want you to get a temperature check on the city of Dallas and what's going on out there, because I'm sure a lot of fans very, very happy about this news considering everything that took place months ago. But Tim, give me your thoughts. How big of this is this for just this Dallas franchise, and also, you know, a GM that maybe not too many people are very thrilled with as of late?
Well, when it came down to the Mavericks and the Spurs, that's going to be the ultimate balance that we may be talking about for the next 20 years, because we almost saw Cooper Flagg paired with Wemby. And I actually think both these guys are going to be the face of the next generation of the NBA. Like, those guys are going to be the face. When LeBron and Steph and Harden and Durant, when all those guys move on, I don't think it's going to be Anthony Edwards. I think it's going to be Wemby and Cooper Flagg. So when it came down to those two guys, it was like, oh my goodness, they could be paired together. And then Dallas gets the first pick. Interesting how they get the first pick, huh? Didn't they trade like one of the greatest players of their generation to Los Angeles? And now they got the first pick in the draft. Look at Coach looking around. Yeah, you best be looking around right now, Coach. Yeah, so congratulations to the Mavericks. What an amazing thing. We've seen it before. Amazing things happen in the draft, whether it's Patrick Ewing in '85 or Derrick Rose going to Chicago or LeBron James going to Cleveland. Nico Harrison, breathe a sigh of relief, my friend.
Nico's probably like, this was my plan all along. I already knew we were landing that top pick, so don't sweat it. But, Coach, you talked a little bit about it, who Cooper Flagg could be paired with. You're looking at, let's say, potentially a healthy AD, a healthy Kyrie, Clay. You talk about some of these pieces. Just how do you see him fitting in with this Dallas team?
Well, the one thing that Klay Thompson needs, he needs space. And when you have Anthony Davis in the lineup, who draws double teams, Kyrie Irving, who draws 1.5 to 2 defenders, Cooper Flagg, who will do the same. You got 3 potential guys that can draw, 1, 2, and 3 defenders on them. And when you do that, then you play 2-on-1 and 3-on-2 on the backside. That makes Klay Thompson's life easier. Got to remember, Klay Thompson played with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. Those guys sometimes got triple teamed. Who was the reward? Who got awarded for that? Klay Thompson. So this young man, Cooper Flagg, can also play defense. So he's a two-way player. Tim Dahl and I had a chance to see him up close and personal at the Final Four, and he's definitely not overrated. This kid is really special. This type of talent only comes around, every so often. But guys like a Klay Thompson is going to benefit. And it's going to make Kyrie's life easier, Anthony Davis, when they're healthy, because this kid is special.
Absolutely. And Coach, I want to circle back to you about the other team out there in Texas that you're fairly familiar with. Looking at the Spurs, they do now have that number 2 overall pick. You have somebody that you can pair with Wemby. What do you like there with that number 2 pick?
Yeah, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, either one of those guys. Probably for me, I would lean more towards Bailey, but it could be Harper. It's a toss-up. I know Tim watched those guys quite a bit, so I would be curious to hear what he had to say about those guys. But the Spurs, they end up number 2, coaching change, Mitch Johnson, a new coach. Coach Popovich passed him the keys. The Spurs have always been terrific at drafting. And it's not just that number 2 pick, it's also the last pick in the lottery. So the Spurs can do some damage there. Maybe, package some players to get a veteran player. Who knows? I know Giannis Antetokounmpo would look really good playing next to Wemby.
What do you make of that, Timmy?
Wow, Giannis and Wemby. It'd be tough to get into those lanes with that length of those two guys. Of those two guys, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, I think Ace Bailey is an amazing talent. I think he's got Tracy McGrady written all over him, like 27, 28 points a game in the NBA. Right now, I would take Dylan Harper because he's a pick and roll guy. He plays with great pace. He's got a high basketball IQ. This is going to ultimately be the pick that we're going to look back on and be like, how did the Spurs take Dylan Harper? They could have had Ace Bailey. This is going to be one of those conversations we're going to have. I think right now Dylan Harper is better. Who's going to be better in 5 or 6 years? I think it could be Ace Bailey. So, don't forget they have Stephon Castle there. This is a Spurs team. All of a sudden, they have propelled themselves, in my eyes. I think they're going to be right on the cusp of making the playoffs next year. 43, 44 wins if Wemby and everybody else stays healthy. But, yes, right now, the safe pick in my eyes is Dylan Harper.
All right, meanwhile, let's jump down the line because at number 3, we have the Sixers that are picking 3rd. They could have lost that pick. Instead, they keep it. This is a Sixers team that they dealt with injuries. That ultimately they were, let's put it this way, they were expected to be a playoff team. Injuries absolutely demolishing those chances. But, Coach, what do you think with the Sixers picking 3rd?
The Sixers won tonight. Sure, they would have wanted to get the number 1 pick. But when you land in that 2nd or 3rd position, it's a huge win for Philly because they could have very well lost his pick tonight. So to land at number 3, get healthy, you're going to still get a terrific player. I think a player in Bailey or Harper that's going to be ready to play on day 1 that you can insert into the lineup, that you don't have to send to the G League or wait 3 years on. When you look at Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, we'll see if he can get back healthy. But Elton Brand, and who looked at becoming the GM of Atlanta, looked at that job and pulled his name out in the rest of their front office, I think they're happy tonight. They're not as celebratory as the Dallas Mavericks, but I think they're extremely happy.
Yeah, getting to maintain that pick, I think that certainly is a win in itself, and still getting a top 3 pick in this year's draft. Meanwhile, Timmy, maybe luck not necessarily in the Utah Jazz favor. They had the highest odds of selecting number 1 overall. Instead, they will be picking 5th. Considering that they are in the top 5, is this a win or a loss for the Jazz? What do you make of this right here?
We went on before the draft was announced tonight, and they have floated out. When I say they, I meant Jazz front office, that they were even open to trading the number 1 pick, which in my eyes, even putting that out in the atmosphere was crazy. But the Jazz have an interesting dilemma. They didn't want the first pick this year. They want the first pick next year. So I expect them to lose this year and lose and lose. The Jazz owner, Ryan Smith, is the biggest donor to what school? BYU. Who is the number 1 player in the country? AJ DeBanster. What school is he going to? Ding, 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 BYU. So next year, AJ is going to be the first pick in the draft. The Jazz want him. So I'm going to say right now, in 365 days from now, Keanu Avery, the number one pick in the NBA draft, is going to be AJ DeBance, that he will be going to Utah. So, Coach, what you shaking your head for?
Well, I agree. Utah's the biggest loser tonight. But if the system was set up the way it was in the past, whereas you have the worst record in the NBA, you will be guaranteed, like the NFL, to get the first pick in the draft. There's no guarantee. There's just no guarantee. And the Jazz just have some bad luck. I hope my player Colin Sexton gets a chance to get traded to a playoff team. I want to see him play in the postseason.
Oh, yeah. So biggest maybe loser in this year's draft. And if maybe things don't work out next year, that could be back-to-back just big L's handed to Utah. But hey, anything can happen. As always, Avery Johnson, Tim Doyle, fellas, thank you. Well, who's not the biggest loser, the biggest winner? Dallas Mavericks owning that top pick in this year's draft. Well, let's just say it right now. Cooper Flagg going number 1 overall for the Dallas Mavericks. Cooper Flagg will stay in blue. The Dallas Mavericks earning the number 1 overall selection in this June's NBA draft. Following Monday night's draft lottery, it's only the second time in franchise history the Mavs have owned the number 1 pick. They came in with a 1.8% chance, and now they own it. We're joined by CBS Sports NBA analyst Tim Doyle, and in studio with the director of scouting for 24/7 Sports, Adam Finkelstein. And it's the Mavs, fellas, who get that first overall pick, second time in franchise history. They're landing Cooper Flagg. Adam, tell me about Flagg's fit in Dallas.
Well, he's gonna build a bridge. He's gonna build a bridge to the future while being able to help them win right now. Because the way this team is constructed after that Luka Doncic trade is in win now mode. Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, they're both in their 30s. They have to. Nico Harrison obviously is built this to win right now, and he has said as much. When we win, maybe fans will feel differently. Well, fans feel differently right now because they have a player who can come in and help Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis from day one, and then grow into the guy who takes over this franchise. So this is an ideal long-term plan. And listen, there were a lot of people who were critical of Nico Harrison and the decision to trade Luka Doncic, but this could not have worked out any better. This is beyond an ideal scenario for Dallas, both in the short term and in the long term.
Well, we already figured whoever gets that number 1 overall pick, we know where they're going, but now it's time to pull out the mock. So let's head to number 2. Looking at who's next on this list, we're looking at San Antonio. Adam, who do you have falling to the Spurs?
So I really think this is going to be a tough decision. I said before the lottery that I thought that Dylan Harper was basically a lock to go number 2, but what I'm going to say now is that I think San Antonio, because they have Stephon Castle, who's the reigning Rookie of the Year, because they traded for De'Aaron Fox, they don't really need another big playmaker, especially a suspect shooter. Now, will they take the best player available, who I believe is Harper, or will they take Ace Bailey, a player who I believe is a lock top 3 prospect? There's been a lot of buzz in the last couple of weeks about maybe he's slipping. Could he be 4? Could he be 5? I think he's firmly in the top 3. I think he fits better in this San Antonio rotation with who they already have there. And his shot making, his size, and his athleticism, there are star-type outcomes there. So I think they're taking Dylan Harper, but I think they are going to look long and hard at his Rutgers teammate, and potentially we'll see what happens. I also think, Tim, you mentioned this earlier, I think this pick could be up on the trade market too, with a lot of people trying to target Dylan Harper here.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Spurs have De'Aaron Fox, you don't want to say they're similar players. They're both left-handed. De'Aaron Fox is right now in the prime of his career. We're talking about a perennial all-star, gets 25, 26 points a game. Ace Bailey, I think, is going to average 27 points a game in the NBA one day. But that might be 5 years from now. I mean, he's still a baby. When I see him play, it's like a Bambi out there. Like, he's like a young deer. Now, he measured in at only 6'7" and a half. So with sneakers on, he's 6'9". He was listed at 6'10" at Rutgers. But his upside is, like, through the roof. So, you know, this is what front offices have to do. They have to play this game. Because if you have De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper's not really a fit because Dylan Harper likes to have the ball in his hands. So Ace Bailey's more of a spot-up guy, can come off screens. Like, he's a different type of player. So depending on the roster, Ace Bailey's probably more of a fit right now. Dylan Harper, in my eyes, is like the ultimate safe bet to be excellent at the NBA level, like 22 points, 8 rebounds. He knows how to play the pick and roll. Now the draft gets really interesting, guys, as far as what the Spurs are going to do at number 2.
Yeah, a safe bet in that selection, but I think this can honestly go either direction. So I think this can really shake up how things continue after that #1 overall pick. But let's move on to that third pick, Adam, because we got the Sixers on the clock. What's a good landing spot? Who is a good target for them?
Well, I think Ace Bailey would make a lot of sense here. As I said, he has been top 3 on my board all season long. It comes down to this. I know he's not 6'10", but those of us who saw him in high school always knew he wasn't 6'10". Still a jumbo wing, still a high-level athlete, still an extreme tough shot maker. And when he is on, Tim is right. That Tracy McGrady comparison, that is spot on. The problem is he's not always on, and the problem is he doesn't always impact winning. However, you put him in a situation where you got Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain. A lot is set up there for him to learn. And again, he has star-type outcomes. So this would be a huge win for Philadelphia. And if somehow this flipped and Ace goes #2, I think Harper is the pick here.
Steelers still getting a very, very solid pick right there. But then we move on to #4, and we're looking at this Hornets team where 9 players, including their starting 5, locked into guaranteed contracts going into this season. What's a good spot and who's a good addition to this group?
VJ Edgecombe is perfect here because you've got a point guard in Ball who doesn't really like to guard. He's supremely talented, but he doesn't guard anybody, and he's often injured. Now, VJ Edgecombe is the antithesis to that. A high-level competitor, an elite athlete with a ton of defensive upside. He's got to get better off the ball, but he can really guard the ball. Put him next to Ball, who's got extreme spacing, combined with Edgecombe's athleticism and downhill driving, and you've got a fantastic tandem that could presumably play together for the next decade plus. You throw Brandon Miller in there, you've got an extreme shot maker on the wing. This fit makes all the sense in the world. As long as VJ Edgecombe is on the board at 4, I expect this to be a fairly easy pick.
Yeah, I mean, he went to my high school. I've had a long relationship with him. He's an outstanding young man. He's a student of the game. I think he's going to need to go there and set a tone from a leadership standpoint. You know, Adam talked about the talent there in Charlotte. I don't think anybody knows anything about basketball. They knows that there's talent there, but there's a lack of, like, professionalism. When I saw VJ Edgecombe, I just see a professionalism like a Ray Allen. It sort of kind of has a similar game, similar body as well. Doesn't shoot it as well as Ray. Only shot 34% from 3 at Baylor, but he was fantastic this past summer when he played for the Bahamas and all, like, the FIBA World Cup stuff. He was one of the best scorers on the team. He could bring a level of professionalism. I just don't know if, like, the Bridges, the Brandon Millers, the LaMelo Ball is going to let a young guy come in because he does all the right things. And he's a great teammate. That franchise is kind of an eye roll. If I was a professional athlete, that's like one of the last places I would want to go. But as far as fit, yeah, he fits in pretty well.
All right, meanwhile, we round out the top 5. Utah Jazz had the highest odds to land that #1 pick, and we talked about it, maybe the biggest losers of the draft lottery night. This is a team that doesn't quite, we talked about this, doesn't quite have a star, that go-to guy. We did see some guys come on later on as the season progressed, but who do you see as a good pick for that?
I think Trey Johnson would make a lot of sense here. They picked Isaiah Collier last year and really invested a lot of time in him. He is a playmaking, passing lead guard. Keontae George was their pick a few years ago, but I think we're starting to see that he may be better as, like, your first guard off the bench. Trey Johnson, really nice compliment to Collier because, frankly, he's just a bucket. He's a shot maker. He proved it this year at Texas. Those guys fit together really nicely. And if you have Keontae George, maybe you've got a nice 3-guard rotation for the long run. If not, you could see what the value is on the open market for George. And then just for Coach, we'll get Colin Sexton moved to a contender because that's what Coach wants. I think that's likely to happen. The thing I will say here is Utah will still be, I don't want to say in tank mode, but they will still be incentivized to try and get a high draft pick. As Tim said, A.J. Debonta. Tim, I need you to look up Darren Peterson, though, for me. Just look up Darren Peterson. It's not a foregone conclusion next year that A.J.'s #1. Just look up Darren Peterson. But I think Trey Johnson would make a lot of sense here.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. 365 days from now, do not be surprised if the Utah Jazz get the #1 pick in the draft. We talked about it before the show. They talked about trading this year's #1 pick. I don't think they would have done that, but next year, Kiana, I think we're going to be sitting here, and the Jazz are going to be drafting #1, and they're going to be taking A.J. Debonta.
Jazz drafting #1, writing down the date. Got it. I got it. We're going to be here same time, same place next year. And, Timmy, we're going to see if that all comes into fruition. But as of for now, Adam, Tim, thank you guys so much. So we got 1 through 5 locked away. What about 6 through 10? Adam rejoins us to give us the rest of his mock draft for the later picks in this draft. That's coming your way next right here on CBS Sports HQ.
So here's a look at picks 6 through 10 for the 2025 NBA Draft. The Wizards at number 6, Pelicans at 7, Nets. We know we're trying to tank at 8, Raptors at 9, and then the Rockets at number 10. And for more on these picks, we bring in Adam Finkelstein and Tim Doyle for more on who they think will go 6 through 10 in this year's draft. And when you look at what the Wizards have, right, and their current roster, who do you think is the best player, Adam Finkelstein, that they should select?
Well, it's Dylan Harper, but he's not around. So the second best option, because this is a team that needs a point guard. They drafted Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly in 2 consecutive lottery picks. They traded for A.J. Johnson. The hole in the lineup right now, when you look at those young assets, is at the point guard position. Harper's off the board. I think they have to give a long, hard look to Kasparas Jakučionis. Talking about a big point guard from Illinois, Lithuanian, 6'5", really good feel for the game. Shooting potential. I'm not going to say he's a knockdown shooter because his percentages weren't that good this year at Illinois, but there is belief in his shooting ability long-term, belief in his ability to play pick and roll. And again, when you were looking at this roster that they are building from the ground up, he fits a clear void at the point guard position and gives them one with size, which is also consistent with their theme when you look at the other youngsters that they've drafted in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it would just be interesting if they're going to give him the ball. Because here's a guy who's really valuable when he has the ball in his hands. And I think he can make others better, and I think he's going to be a fantastic professional player. But, man, he went to a really tough situation. And you're playing with a guy like Jordan Poole. If Poole's still there, like, you think Jordan Poole's going to pass this rookie the ball? Like, this is a tough spot. The guy can certainly play. I watched him a lot. I live in the Chicagoland area. He's a legit 10, 12-year pro, a high-impact player. He just ended up in the wrong situation. Of all the teams, the Wizards could have used a top 3 pick. They needed somebody to revolutionize their franchise. At this number 6, this guy's not going to do that.
Yeah, definitely not. But that's no slouch to him. You know, a lot of great players or a lot of great role players, you know, who end up, 6 through 10. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that. But for the Wizards, when it comes to just building their franchise and getting back to a space where they're respected, yeah, that guy, great as he is, definitely not going to change their franchise. Now, how about the Pelicans? Zion Williamson, they selected him number 1. They still feel like he's going to be the franchise. So who do you have at number 7 to pair up with him and the rest of the players that the Pelicans have?
Can I just say how surprised I was that he was the guy representing the organization tonight? I mean, I think that's quite a statement from Joe Dumars, right, who just took over the front office and now has a decision to make. Does he continue to build off Zion Williamson, who's missed more games than he's played in, or does he move him and start from scratch? Let's assume that tonight is an indication that he's going to build off Zion Williamson, or maybe he's just, trying to increase his market value. We'll see. Either way, I really like Con Kneppel in this one. This is a guy that just knows how to play. He knows how to play off other good players. Listen, once you get outside the top 5 of the draft, the chances of finding a go-to scorer are very, very low. So what you should be focused on is trying to find a functional contributor. Con Kneppel can do that in a variety of different ways because he's highly skilled. He's an elite shooter of the basketball. He does not need a lot of touch time, which means he can make quick decisions with the basketball. He's big enough to guard multiple positions, to switch up the lineup, not necessarily onto guards, but he can switch on the bigger forwards. I think he would create a lot of space for Zion if they're committed to kind of still trying to let him do his thing.
Yeah, I was looking at the Pelicans last season. Now, I get it. Guys were hurt. They had 11 different players average 10 points or more, not 10 minutes. That's how many different guys played for them last year. On paper, this team should be better. Game's not played on paper. I think Zion Williamson, when in shape, which happens like 35 games every 2 or 3 years, could be a top 5 MVP candidate. I think he's that good. So I don't think that they're going to get rid of him. Con Kneppel's a guy who can make shots, got a high basketball IQ. He plays old school, and I think old school wins now. Obviously, that's what Joker plays. Like, there's old school guys. Draymond Green plays the same way. Chris Paul plays the same way. Conkinable has kind of that old soul to his game where he's never going to wow you with athleticism. I like Trey Murphy, McCollum, Murray. On paper, this team should be much better. If healthy, this team could clearly make a run to the playoffs.
Right. That's the key word, if healthy. And that's been the issue for them for quite a few years now. For the Brooklyn Nets, ever since, the trio of James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, they've really taken a nosedive when it comes to their production level and their success. So they're at number 8. Adam, who do you have going number 8 in your mock draft?
I want Derek Queen here. I think he would fit nicely next to Nick Claxton. Nick Claxton is a rim-running, lob threat shot blocker who presumably their center of the future. Derek Queen could give him a mismatch player who could play 4 and 5, so he could back up Claxton at the 5, and then he can come in and he can play make from the 4. He can really put the ball on the floor. He's got some of the best hands in the entire draft. That not only allows him to catch tough passes, but it makes him a high-volume rebounder, gives him a lot of touch when he's in terms of his shooting potential, which I think exists, and that is going to be a key long-term variable. We know he can put it on the floor. We know he can pass. Can he get to the point where he can stretch the floor? You saw that one-handed catch right there. That is exactly what I'm talking about with his hands. If Derek Queen can shoot the basketball, it's going to unlock some very high-level offensive upsides. The key is going to be defensively, but when you have Nick Claxton right there, it covers up for a lot. I think Brooklyn could lock up their front court of the future with this.
I think Derek Queen's awesome. I actually think he's awesome. I think he's going to be a fantastic NBA player. I thought he was going to be a little bit more like a Zach Randolph type when I saw him in high school. And then when I watched him in college, he had a little bit more of like an Antoine Walker to his game. He's putting the ball on the floor. Remember that 1-foot shot he hit against Colorado State off the glass? I never thought he was going to have that in his bag. He developed shooting the 3, even though he shoots a little bit of a set shot. Adam, I will say this. He's from Baltimore. He went to Maryland. I don't know how the Wizards don't draft him. Do they need him? No. But how do they not draft him at a few picks before that?
I could see that. I think he'd fit with Sarr. I could see that.
Yeah, he definitely could. But, yeah, it's always interesting what these franchises do because sometimes they make moves that don't make sense, and then they hit on a guy who just comes out of nowhere. So we'll be interested to see how everything shakes out. Now, how about the Raptors at number 9, right? Scotty Barnes, he is their leader, right? You got R.J. Barrett, Mayo Quickly. Who do you have going number 9, looking at the roster construction of Toronto? Man?
Well, here's what we know about Masai Ujiri. He's committed a lot of salary in the coming years, and he's traded for a lot of guys in the middle of the lineup. He's got a decision to make at the center position next year. But the things that we know that he has coveted historically, length and athleticism. Who's got the most length and athleticism in this draft? Well, it's a center, and the center is the position that he does not necessarily have solidified for the foreseeable future. So I think this pick could very likely be Kaman Malawach. And Malawach, 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. He fits the archetype of a rim-running, shot-blocking, lob threat. That is just the type of center that has most consistently made the immediate impact in the NBA with guys like Derek Lively and Yves Missy in the last couple of years. I think Malawach could step in, play immediate minutes in Toronto, fit what Masai Ujiri is looking for, and then grow into a bigger role offensively as the years go on.
They better pray he's there because this is a fantastic pick if Toronto gets him. Defense is optional for the Raptors. Here's a guy who rebounds, who blocks shots, who even proved at the international level as still a guy who hadn't played in college that he could match up with the pros. Remember last year in the Olympics, like he got a chance to get some run, maybe exhibition games. Still, those guys are still pros. He made a shot from the perimeter. He was boxing out. He was playing physical. I was like, oh, yeah. Now, is it going to happen immediately with him? I don't think so. I think this is still like a work in progress. Now, how good this guy could become, I think he could be awesome. I think he could average like 18 points and 11 rebounds. It's just not going to happen immediately. But if he could learn from a guy like Jakob Hurtel, who's 29 years old, and match up, I think this would be an amazing pick for the Raptors.
Yeah, I'm with you because the expectations are not going to be that high for the Raptors. Nobody's expecting them to contend for a title, so he can really grow into his role. And we saw how he evolved at Duke from day one to that national semifinal against Houston. The growth was very apparent. Now, the Houston Rockets, they need growth when it comes to their shooting, right? Just a lockdown, or not a lockdown, but somebody who they can rely on in the clutch. They're at number 10, Adam. Who do you think they're going to get?
All right, now you said two things right there. You said shooting and you said lockdown. We know they need defend. They're not taking anybody who doesn't guard. We know that about what Houston is all about in terms of their culture. There are not a whole lot of 3-and-D prospects in this draft. And I think sometimes when we're forecasting the draft, we think too much about what has happened in the past and not enough about what could happen in the future. So I've got a little bit of a swing here. I think Houston could go with someone like Carter Bryant, a high-level athlete from Arizona. Now, I know what you're saying. He only averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds per game. How could he ever be picked in the lottery? Well, it's because he fits that 3-and-D prototype. This guy made about 45% of his open catch-and-shoot threes this year at Arizona, and that completely changed his draft status. I understand it's a small sample size, but if he can show enough intrigue in workout settings that jumper is sustainable, it is really going to help his draft status. He's a high-level athlete. He's got an NBA-ready body with more room on his frame to continue to add muscle mass. If you saw him in high school, you know he's got more passing potential than we saw this year at Arizona, and he is a very versatile defender who sometimes even guarded point guards for Arizona. So I think this, although it's counterintuitive, could make sense for Houston.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you got to find those diamonds in the rough, right? The first 3 picks are easy. Maybe the first 4 with VJ. I think Queen is going to be in that top 5 or 6. Now you start to now this is where you make your money. You know, you start looking through, is Jeremiah Fears, is this too early for him? Do they need a guy like that? This is where, you got to start, you're drafting a guy in the top 10. He's averaging 6.5 points a game. So the Rockets are built to win right now, but they also have to find someone that fits their culture. Carter at this spot may do that.
Yeah, he fits the spot, and if Concanipple is somehow still there, he would also be a great fit for them when you look at their shooting and his ability to defend multiple positions. Tim Doyle, Adam Finkelstein, always appreciate the time. And here's a look at Adam's NBA mock draft after the lottery news came down. So he's got the Wizards going. It's Kasparis, the point guard from Illinois, Concanipple from Duke. Then the Maryland star, Derek Queen. Another Dookie, come on, Malawach for the Raptors. And then Arizona, Carter Bryant going to the Rockets. And coming up, so we've unpacked all those draft picks in Adam's mock draft. How about 11 through 14? Adam and Tim are back for that after the break. All right, so here's how the order looks for picks 11 through 14. The Trailblazers at 11, then the Bulls, Hawks, and the Spurs at number 14. Time now to bring in Adam Finkelstein and Tim Doyle for more on picks 11 through 14. So we know, right, how the Trailblazers have looked past years, right, after the Damian Lillard era. And they gave a lot of teams trouble, right? A lot of contending teams. So when you think about what they need, who do you have going 11 to the Trailblazers?
So I've got Jeremiah Fears, and the reason for this is because I think Portland really did a nice job on their front court last year. They got Denny Avdia in a trade. They drafted Donovan Clingan. Now, the thought is that they had their backcourt of the future. Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe. But those 3 guys, they just don't fit together. They've never really fit together. And I think we've seen enough evidence of that right now that at the very least they need a contingency plan. Fears is that contingency plan because he is a high upside guard. Now, he's a bit of a polarizing prospect because while he's got a high ceiling, the floor is a little more uncertain because there's all kinds of questions about how that body's going to translate. And I think most importantly, how he's going to adapt to having to share the ball with other good players. This guy was #1 in usage in the SEC this year. The SEC was the best college basketball conference in the history of the sport. So the game's going to change for Fears, but I think it makes sense for Portland to take a high upside swing, get another asset in the backcourt just in case they have to move off one of their current starters.
Yeah, I mean, he's still only 18 years old. He won't be 19 until October, and I got a chance to see him play in high school at Joliet West, and you could see the talent was abundant, but you just see him on the highlights here, and he's, he's still a teenager and definitely needs to grow into his body. What a great coach to play for, though, and a guy like Chauncey Billups really understands the point guard position. It's not about talent with him. It's about slowing down the game, understanding how to play in the pick and roll. So I think this is a pretty good situation for him. But the talent is crazy. I think he's a guy who could be easily a starting point guard in the NBA.
Yeah, I'll be really excited to see how the Trailblazers do, and especially if they do select that man right there, or I should say that young man, because he still is a teenager. Now, the Chicago Bulls, Adam, Tim, they are a perennial play-in team. You know, they're not bad enough where they get in the lottery, right, a lot of times, or they don't finish out of the postseason, but they're also not that great when it comes to where they finish during the regular season. So where do you see them going in your mock draft as they look to, I guess, revitalize this franchise?
I've got Colin Murray-Boyles being an option here. I think, listen, he's undersized, and he's more the exception than the rule because he's an undersized big who doesn't shoot it, and that's not supposed to translate in the modern-day NBA. But this is a player who is so good at what he does that I do think he can make it where others haven't. And here's what he does. He's long, he's strong, he's physical, and he's very, very smart. You see him going right into the bodies here, but more than that, he is someone who can process the game really quickly. He's going to be able to play off short rolls, off dribble handoffs, and if they believe that guys like Modest Buzelis and others are going to be able to provide enough floor spacing in the front court, that will create enough of a void where Colin Murray-Boyles can step in and bring that physicality, bring that toughness, which Billy Donovan would appreciate.
Yeah, the way the Bulls are playing now, since I live in the area, I obviously watch a lot of their games. They've decided to spread you out and outscore you. So that's been their philosophy. Giddey was sensational. He got better and better. They kind of just handed him the keys to be the ultimate playmaker there. So I get what you're saying. You're going to need some big guys, right? You can't just only shoot threes. You need somebody who's going to rebound. You need some physicality. So I get it there. I think Liam McNeely is going to be a pretty good guy that may end up being a fit just because he spreads the floor and he's got that old school basketball DNA that I think Billy Donovan's going to really like. But you're going to need bigs there in Chicago, so I get what you're saying, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colin Murray-Boyles, he was one of the few bright spots on that South Carolina team that just took L after L after L in that brutal SEC conference. Now, how about the Hawks at 13, right? Trae Young trying to build around him still.
Are they? Do we know?
We don't know. We don't know. They made some moves in the front office, right? But right now he's still on the roster, Adam.
He is.
Right now he's still on the roster. So who do you have going to the Hawks?
Well, I've got a guy who can fit whether they re-sign Trae Young, because it's decision time now, or whether they move off him, and that's Walter Clayton Jr. And let's just be very clear. I'm not projecting him to be a lottery pick because he led Florida to a national championship. I'm projecting him to be a lottery pick because I believe he's one of the most deadly shooters in this draft, and I think shooting is one of, if not the most important skill in the NBA. He's got on-off ball versatility, which means that if they can get away with it defensively, he could create some spacing for Trae Young. Trae Young comes out of the game, he can back him up and play on the ball. That was something he added to his game this year at Florida. Now, he's going to have to defend with a more consistent sense of urgency, but in the NBA, if you want to make that money and you want to have a lasting career, you don't have a choice. So let's assume that he taps into that physicality, that football background, and starts to bring it every day on the defensive end of the floor. He's going to potentially be a very valuable player with that shot making. If the defense becomes competent, I like him here for Atlanta.
I think the Hawks have some really interesting pieces. They have Dyson Daniels, who's just like a steal machine. He averaged 3 steals a game. And if you go back and look at Zachary Reese-Sachet, when he got an opportunity to play and actually shoot the ball 9 to 13 times, he's got some talent. So now you got some wings that are really intriguing. Yeah, you got to make a big fundamental decision, Chris. Is this Trae Young? We've seen this movie, got me to an Eastern Conference final, but defense can be optional. A guy dribbles. So they're going to have to make a huge organizational decision with Trae Young. But Walter Clayton Jr., one of the greatest tournament performances I had ever seen. Now, is college going to translate to the NBA? I don't know. That's why I'm sitting in my mom's basement. I don't make these decisions. But the guy in college was absolutely sensational. He won every single game for them down the stretch. I would not mind drafting him at any point.
No, I think he would be a really solid selection, like you said. Every game in the tournament, he was awesome. Maybe not the whole way through, but at the end of the game, it didn't matter. He was making the big plays when it mattered the most. Now, how about the Spurs at 14? Who do you like to to get that pick?
Well, I'm not selling my Liam McNeely stock. I had him as a top 10 player in the country coming out of high school last year. I projected him as a top 10 pick in this draft for the vast majority of the year. I understand that he didn't finish the season the way a lot of people hoped, but the bottom line is he's still a very good shooter, much better than the final numbers will show. He measured an inch taller today than most people expect, so he's got really good wing size. I thought he made strides defensively on that end of the floor under Dan Hurley. He's a high processor of the game, and he is an alpha competitor. Now, in San Antonio, we'll see what they do with number 2, but what I can guarantee you is they need spacing around Wemby. They got De'Aaron Fox. He pressures the paint. They got Wemby. He's just a cheat code. They need players who can defend their position and provide spacing. Liam McNeely can certainly provide spacing. If they're comfortable that he can hold his own on the defensive end, I think he would make a lot of sense here.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if he slips this far. I had him going a little bit sooner. If he's not there, I think it's a classic San Antonio Spurs move to just take like an international guy. Like this is like classic Spurs. Like they just take somebody and do it like this. Like 6 people clap and you don't know who he is. Like the international guy I'll throw at you is Igor Demon from BYU. I think that he's got a huge upside. You know, his shooting is something that is not in Liam McNeely's ballpark right now, but he can put the ball on the floor. He's an excellent passer. He makes guys better. Kind of fits that Spurs mode. But if McNeely's not there, I say it's minus 500. The Spurs take an international player at this point.
Hey, look, they've had a really great track record, right, of their international players turning into great players, all-stars, and Hall of Famers. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, Tim. Now, one thing I do want to bring up. The Mavericks had a 1.8% chance to win the lottery. I mean, they were in the play-in tournament, for crying out loud, Adam. And I just want to know, do you feel like this lottery system is working? Do you want it to change, or are you fine with what we have right now?
Well, I can assure you Tim is going to have a more entertaining answer to this question than I am. What I will say is this. I think everybody wants to see the process. They want to see, you know, like back in the day when the lottery came out and you used to see which ping pong ball came up into that. That's what people want to see with the NBA right now. Because to just open the folder and it says, oh, Dallas has the #1 pick. Forget about Luka. Surprise. Nobody wants to see that. If the NBA is really interested in transparency, they've got to show the total process. I don't know that it makes sense. You know, people are saying this is like, oh, it was rigged. Like, why would they want to rig it for Dallas and an owner who is apparently more interested in, you know, casinos than he is about winning basketball games? That doesn't track for me. But I understand why people, listen, I get the math, I get the probability, and I understand why people are skeptical, especially after we've had Derrick Rose end up in Chicago, LeBron James end up in Cleveland, Wemby end up in San Antonio. So there's a little bit of a pattern here.
Yeah, I mean, when it came down to the final 2 franchises, I just couldn't believe it was going to be Wemby and Cooper Flag. Like, I was like, oh, no, this is not my vision. I think the vision of me in the NBA is going to be Wemby and Cooper Flag are going to be the next faces of the NBA. I don't think it's going to be Anthony Edwards. I don't think it's going to be Ja Morant. I think it's going to be Wemby, and it's going to be Cooper Flag. So there was a chance that they were going to be on the same team. So I was like, oh, my goodness, this is going to happen. And instead it falls to Dallas. So no state income tax for Cooper, so he's going to keep more of his money, which is a good thing, right? Versus going to a state where don't want to name names. LeBron's laughing at it. But, you know, he went to Cleveland. Derrick Rose went to Chicago. Patrick Ewing in '85 went to New York. Be interested to see if next year, guys, if Utah, with their ownership really heavily involved with BYU, if they get the #1 pick, because it would be AJ DeBansta at #1. I know Adam has some other guys that are up there right now. If the draft was today, it'd probably be AJ. So if the Jazz get the first pick next year, I don't know. I think we got to start looking at this lottery system. It seems like things are a little too interesting for me.
We got to start looking at Darren Peterson. That's what we got to start looking at.
Hey, don't sleep on Darren Peterson. Don't sleep. Yo, both of them, they are cold. They are cold. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how it all shakes out. Tim Doyle, Adam Finkelstein, always a pleasure giving us great insight and entertainment. So again, here is a look at Adam's NBA mock draft. It's got Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma going to the Trailblazers, trying to bolster that backcourt. And then for the Bulls, wants to match some size. Colin Murray Boyles from South Carolina. How about Walton Clayton Jr.? An incredible tournament run leading Florida to that national championship. Adams got him going to the Hawks. And then Spurs, Liam McNeely, who was a sensational freshman from UConn. When he was healthy, he was definitely their most impactful player.
Kyle Boone and Adam Finkelstein, and we know that Flagg is number one, but Fink, where would you rank him if you had to take the last 10 years? You know, you got Wemby, you got Zion, even though he hasn't quite turned out in the NBA. Where would he rank among prospects over the last 10?
You know, I think he's in the top 5. I think he's somewhere ahead of Zion, but behind Wemby, just because Wemby's just physical measurements were so unprecedented. But Cooper has a legitimate chance to evolve into a star player in the NBA, and I don't say that lightly. The other thing that's really exciting about him is even his floor, so to speak, or the worst case scenario, still looks like the second best player on an NBA championship caliber team. So there's really not a whole lot of bust potential here. And that is really rare, because when you look back at this draft, for all the stars that have come out of it, you get a decent amount of misses too, even at the very top of the draft. And there is very little chance that Cooper Flagg will be a miss. It's the rare combination of a high floor and a potentially high ceiling. One of the reasons why so many teams are excited about the possibilities tonight. Could be a franchise-altering moment for whoever gets the number 1 pick later on this evening.
Yeah, and I'll go a little bit bolder here with Fink. I think he's the second best prospect since Anthony Davis. I would put him just behind Victor Wembanyama. I'd put him ahead of Anthony Davis. I'd put him ahead of Zion Williamson. And for all the reasons that Fink mentioned, right? He's a great defensive prospect. He's a defensive playmaker who served as a defensive anchor for a Duke team that won 35 games. They were top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency, with him leading the way in points, in rebounds, in block shots, in steals, and assists. I mean, he does everything. And so there's a reason there is a lot of anticipation leading up into tonight's lottery, because I think it's true that it will change the trajectory of whichever franchise is lucky enough to get the lottery balls at number 1 and pick number 1 in this year's draft.
And picks 2 and 3 could be both Rutgers players. Those are our second and third ranked players in our rankings. Dylan Harper, 2. Ace Bailey, 3. Kyle, why is Harper looked at by many as maybe the more sure thing at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. More of a sure thing in that he's a two-way guard who can pass the ball, facilitate, and be a scorer. There's in the NBA, I think there's just such a need for guys who fit that type of skill set right now. He can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. He's developed as a shooter. He's got really good size. He's got good pedigree. His dad was Ron Harper, who played in the NBA for a long time. So I think there's a confidence level, right, with Dylan Harper that he's going to be a very good, productive player for the long time. His pacing, his skill level, all of that I think just translates at a really high level. And so, for me, I think that's the difference in picking, Dylan Harper or over an Ace Bailey, over VJ Edgecombe, Trey Johnson, some other guys who we have in the top 5 of our prospect rankings, but just ranked beneath Dylan Harper, who I think is the clear number 2 in this year's draft class.
Now you start to look at tiers, maybe where things drop off a little bit. It feels like Cooper Flagg is 1, then there's a little drop off, and then maybe is there one here before VJ Edgecombe, Adam, who comes in at number 4?
Well, I think the tier break depends on your perspective. Some people would say VJ's in the same tier as Ace Bailey. I think Ace Bailey is in the same tier as Dylan Harper. But the thing with VJ is, first of all, he's probably the best athlete in the class. Second of all, there is no denying or doubting his competitive character. I mean, this guy is a warrior in every way, shape, or form. And 3, he's just continued to get better. In high school, he was really an undersized but athletic wing. And then this year at Baylor, we saw the progression of his guard skills. He was taking more on-ball reps. He was shooting the ball much more consistently, especially before that ankle injury in late January. Then the other thing, too, is he's a two-way player. Now, he's got some strides he's got to make on the defensive end, and that's something that people aren't really talking about. He's getting credited for being one of the best defenders in this class. I think that's fair on the ball, but off the ball, he's got some things to clean up, and that's normal for a young player. But competitive character, athleticism, and if you believe the guard skills are going to keep coming in the future, then it's easy to see how you could have him in that same tier with someone like Ace Bailey.
We'll round out the top 5 of our consensus prospect rankings at CBSSports.com with Trey Johnson, who also played his college ball in the state of Texas for Texas. 1 season, but Kyle really elevated his scoring in the second half of the season.
Yeah, he did. And this is a guy who was ranked as a 5-star recruit coming into college to play at Texas, a really highly touted recruit, and really developed throughout the season as more than just a scorer. I think coming into his college career, people expected he would be an assassin. He'd be someone who is unafraid to take shots, and he did that at Texas. He actually led all freshmen in college basketball in scoring in terms of points per game, but he also developed on the ball as well, passing in terms of his playmaking. And I think there's a lot to like here with Trey Johnson. You look at the numbers here, had 89 3-pointers made as a true freshman. That was first among all Division I freshmen, 121 free throws. So he got to line pretty consistently. There's a lot of diversity and versatility in terms of what he can bring to the table on offense. There's a lot to like. Some people have him as high as number 3 in this class, maybe ahead of Ace Bailey. We have him at number 5 right now, but someone who I think is really starting to grow on NBA teams as they dig into what he did as a true freshman at Texas is really impressive. All right, just missing the top 5 is a player who was one of the best players in the NCAA tournament, really showed us a lot at Duke, opposite Cooper Flagg. Con Kneppel, number 6. Adam, what is he besides just an elite shooter?
Well, he's a guy who can be a terrific blend player and then can take some reps as a primary creator. That's what we saw at Duke in the ACC tournament when Cooper Flagg went down. We got a glimpse of what a rookie season from Con Kneppel could be like if he were the 1A option. Of course, he was not that for the vast majority of the year, and you saw someone who was perfectly content to play in the flow because he's got good size and strength, although I do not expect him to measure at the 6'8" that Duke had him listed at. As you said, Chris, he shoots the ball really well, but beyond that, he just knows how to play. He's got a high feel for the game. He understands spacing. He doesn't catch and hold the ball. He keeps it moving, whether it's a dribble, pass, or shot. So he's going to be able to play with other good players. And when you translate to the NBA and you have to adapt to sometimes not being the best player on your team for the first time, Con Kneppel is going to be one of the players who has an easier adjustment than most because he did it this year at Duke and he thrived in that role.
A lot of these guys, 5 stars just a year ago, but at where we're at right now, we're starting to hit some guys that might have been overlooked going into college. Oklahoma's Jeremiah Fears comes in here, and Kyle, you call him kind of a high-risk, high-reward kind of guy. Wasn't a top 30 recruit by any metric a year ago.
Yeah, that's right. It's an interesting case here with Jeremiah Fears. I have him probably a little bit higher than most would rank him. I will freely admit that. I have him at number 7 here, and there's a lot to like here with Jeremiah Fears, but there's also a lot to be concerned with. You have to do a lot of projecting. He's a very young prospect. He reclassified up, so realistically, we should be talking about someone who just finished his senior prom and is graduating as a high school senior, coming into this class. But at OU was really productive. One of the most athletic finishers around the basket, can get into the paint. Really, really electric with the ball in his hands. Some questions about his defense, some questions about the shot, how those are going to translate and develop over the years. I think we'll determine whether or not he is worthy of a top 10 pick. But if you can do some squinting with Jeremiah Fears, if you can see the ball handling, the athleticism with the way that he gets to the paint, if all that stuff can translate, develop some of the other portions of his game, I really like him. I think he has star potential in this class. There's not a lot to be had outside the top 5. That's why I'm taking a pick here at number 7. I think that the chance that he becomes a star in the future is certainly worth betting on in this class. Going through our top prospects here ahead of tonight's NBA draft lottery and then the combine in Chicago, where our 2 guys are going to be headed a little bit later on today and tomorrow. When we come back, we will hit another son of a former NBA star. It's not just Dylan Harper. How about Jace Richardson, the son of Jason, who won a couple of dunk contests back in the day?
NBA draft lottery tonight, so we are going through our top-ranked prospects at CBSSports.com with Kyle Boone and Adam Finkelstein here on HQ Spotlight. We've gone through the top 7. The real theme here this year, Kyle, is no international prospects in the top 10. A bunch of one-and-dones like Jace Richardson, the son of Jason Richardson, coming in at number 8. How does he compare to his high-flying dad?
Well, he doesn't have the athletic pop that his pop has, but he certainly has the basketball IQ of his father. And I think that's what is most exciting about Jace Richardson, the one-and-done freshman from Michigan State. Earlier this season, Tom Izzo actually did an interview with CBS Sports' Matt Norlander, breaking down a little bit of Jace Richardson's game and said, like, basically, I don't think this guy should be allowed to go to Vegas at any point. He has a photographic memory, and they did some film review where they reviewed Jace Richardson during the game, and some of the things that he remembered just shocked Tom Izzo, who's a Hall of Fame coach. And so I think he thinks the game at a really high level. He plays the game at a really high level, really good shooter, combo playmaker who can do a lot of different things. His offensive game, I think, will translate at a really high level. I think he'll have a productive NBA career just like his pops did. Let's go to Kasparas Yakachunas, who might not be the most explosive out there, Adam. And his three-point numbers were a little bit concerning at Illinois, under 32%. How does he make up for that to become a top 10 prospect?
Well, he's a polarizing prospect because he's not an elite athlete. So you're really banking on the positional size, first of all, the skill set and the feel for the game. And yet, as you said, Chris, he's got that lower three-point percentage. And when you look back at his statistical history, this year was not an anomaly. I mean, we've seen comparable numbers at different spots. And then he had a really high turnover rate as well. So the teams that like him like the overlap of the size, the creativity, the ability to read pick and roll, and the shooting potential. They're not really too caught up on this shooting number. A lot like Liam McNeely at UConn, they believe the shooting is going to be better than we saw in college basketball. The teams that don't like him are worried about someone who doesn't have elite separation and how he might compensate when there's inconsistencies in the shot and the decision making. So this is someone whose range, I think, could be pretty high, not only tonight, but in the 6 weeks leading up to draft night as well.
All right, we've hit every position, I believe, except center. But at number 10, we get our first, and it's Cam Malawach, Kyle.
Yeah, that's right. One and done Duke star. Surprise, surprise, another Dookie inside the top 10. Malawach, an interesting one. 7'2" with a 7'6" wingspan. One and done prospect from the Blue Devils. And, I think there's a lot to like here. Someone who picked up basketball late in his career, really flourished on the FIBA circuit and popped onto the radar as a five-star prospect. His movement skills at his size, I think, is the selling point here with Malawach. Of course, the last time we saw him was in the NCAA tournament in the Final Four. He played 22 minutes, grabbed 0 rebounds, kind of left a sour taste in the mouths of some scouts and some talent evaluators. But, someone who I think can be an above-the-rim finisher as a lob threat, who we saw at Duke was one of the most prolific lob finishers in college basketball, and a really good shot blocker as well. I think there's a really high floor for him. Come on, Malawach coming in as a projected lottery pick in this year's class. And speaking of the tournament, one of the lasting images, probably a shot we're going to see for a while, is from another center who comes in at number 11. It's Maryland's Derek Queen. He's not nearly as tall as Malawach. How do you see him, Adam, at 6'10"?
Well, he's more in that Alperen Sengun type role because he's not especially tall or long or athletic or quick, but he's super skilled. He has some of the best hands in the draft. And I don't mean he can just catch tough passes. It helps him to be an elite positional rebounder. It helps him as a ball handler. It helps him as a passer, and it gives him shooting potential. And those things put together are why people are intrigued, because whatever he may lack in terms of athleticism, he compensates for with playmaking. I mean, you can play off him like Maryland did in the low post or the high post. They ran a lot of their stuff at the elbows. You're seeing more and more of that type of action in the NBA. Quite frankly, this is a prospect that 10 years ago, I think people would have questioned how he fits in the NBA. But in the modern game where you have, listen, the Joker comparisons are not fair, but that's like, think poor man's JV version, the wide-bodied big who isn't a elite athlete, but who can really handle pass and create mismatch problems, again, which is why the Alperen Sengun comparison is probably the most fair. But let's face it, even that one is ambitious because Sengun is such a good player. But it gives you an idea of what type of prospect Derek Queen is.
All right, let's move to number 12. It's another college one and done. All 12 of these have been so far. It's Liam McNeely out of UConn. Kyle, I was reading one of your mock drafts, and you said that maybe playing out of position a little bit in college could help him in the NBA. Why is that?
Yeah, at UConn, he entered a situation where the Huskies really did not have a true playmaking, facilitating lead guard like they've had in recent years and winning back-to-back national championships. And, I think it will end up serving Liam McNeely very well. He ended up playing a lot on the ball as a creator. That was not necessarily his natural role coming into college, but I think he showed a lot doing so as a playmaker, someone who can really create and get downhill as a finisher. I think in the NBA, we're going to see him more playing off the ball, creating value with his defense, with his shooting, and just with his overall energy and effort. That's not really his game, what he did at UConn, but I think there's still a lot to like here in terms of his versatility. He's someone who has been a winner at every spot. He played at UConn. He played at Montverde on a really loaded Montverde team that included Cooper Flagg. So someone who I think can be a little bit of a chameleon, fit a number of different roles in the NBA.
We're looking at the top 14 players. It could be lottery picks in this year's NBA draft with the lottery tonight. We'll find out who gets to pick number 1 in Cooper Flagg. But we're down here at 13. It's a man with 3 names, and the first one that played 2 years of college ball. Adam, how about Colin Murray Boyles?
Well, here's what you need to know. He's got really long arms. He's very physical and strong. He's also an extremely smart player. Now, what he is not is a floor spacer. And so some people say he might be a small ball 5. And similar to what I said with Queen, that is not an archetype that has a ton of traction in the NBA. But a lot of scouts think he is good enough at what he does so that it'll be able to translate, and he could be the exception to the rule. The NBA game, like the college game, has gotten much more physical. We've seen the pendulum kind of swing in the way it's officiated. That's going to bode well for Murray Boyles because he's so physical. He can guard bigger guys inside, but he can also think and execute, make plays off short rolls and dribble handoffs. So I do think he's going to be a very productive NBA player.
And to number 14, it's Yegor Demin, who, Kyle, at times we saw him ranked top 5, definitely top 10 a lot of the year out of BYU, and you would have him higher than this. Why?
Yeah, I would. This is someone who, I think, as you mentioned here, the perception around Yegor Demin has changed a little bit in the last couple of months. There's some holes in his game where he's not the best shooter. I think there's some questions about how his defensive versatility will translate at the NBA level. But when I'm evaluating prospects, I'm looking for a skill that's going to translate. I think he's the best passer in this class, Chris, and I think that's a foundation you can build around. Someone who can be a true lead guard for you at the next level because of his passing ability, because of his vision. I think some of the other parts of his game will end up rounding out. He's shown himself to be really committed as a hard worker, developing some of the finer points of his game. So I really like Demin as a lottery prospect in this class who has room to grow here over the next 6 months leading into the NBA draft.
Kyle Boone, Adam Finkelstein, thanks for the time. Safe travels to Chicago for the lottery tonight. And then the draft combine, which really ramps up tomorrow and later on this week as you look at our top 14. Interesting to note, no international players here in the top 14. The last time we didn't have multiple international players taken in the top 10 was 11 years ago. So this is a unique draft.